it was done last night where we traded David Rittich to Toronto in exchange for a third-round pick in 2022. We have completed a trade here today, and it's in the queue, so I can't get into a whole too much detail until the trade call is completed. My good man Pete Hanlon advises me as he watches social media that apparently it's on social media. So I'm sure there's some speculation out there, but we'll be sending a release about that shortly. I have spoken to Sam Bennett. He's the player obviously involved in the deal, and the rest of the deal will be coming out here shortly. So that's the two transactions that we've made, and no other trades here today.
Okay, we'll get right to questions. We'll start with Danny Austin, please.
Thanks. Brad, this may be oversimplifying it, but there was a lot of talk about whether you were sort of, a buyer or a seller. That's always what happens. I mean, how would you define your approach to these last couple of days?
Well, I know from a media perspective, you want to define it easily as buying or selling. Obviously, when you're in a real good playoff spot, you usually aren't taking anything off your roster. When you're not in a good playoff spot, you more than not, you look to see the value of expiring contracts and whether those whether there's interest or what the market will bear. The other piece is I think I was on both sides. We looked at acquiring players here today, certainly not, as I said earlier, not necessarily from a rental basis or for expiring contract basis, but if there's things that could help us now and if there was things with term moving forward, certainly we explored all avenues. So I wouldn't necessarily define it as you're just buying, you're just selling. I think I was, I had a hand in both pools here today, and this is what transpired.
And understanding that you can't say too much about the trade that's been reported with Sam Bennett, what did go into the decision to move Sam? And I don't know if you can answer, but did he ever rescind his sort of the trade request that we heard about earlier in the season?
Well, I'm not going to get into all that stuff. Obviously, we dealt with the issue, earlier in the year. Got a good relationship with Sam. Think a lot of the young man. Certainly he felt, we had a long discussion today. I think if you could do things over in life, we all, I know I probably got a few redos out there. I think probably everybody does. It probably could have been handled a little bit differently. I don't put that on Sam. But I think at the end of the day, Sam worked hard here, was never an issue, but I think he's going to embrace a fresh start. And we wish him all the best. And for both him and David, these are two, we've got a job to do. I've got a job to do to manage the team. And I said earlier in the week, when you're in the position we're in, and we're certainly not, none of this stuff should be perceived as us throwing in the towel. We had to make some decisions on players whose contracts were expiring. We had expansion issues. We felt we got real good return, but we're not throwing the towel in on the year. But these are also two young guys that we think a lot of and gave a lot to this organization. So it sucks. It sucks when you move players out. I'd like to be more politically correct with my language, but it sucks. But you have to do what's right for the organization. And in both cases, you hate seeing people leave, but I'm real happy with the return that we received.
Yeah, can you just talk about, the David Rittich return was higher than I think many people expected. That says to me that there were several suitors involved. Is it safe to say that there was quite a lot of interest in David Rittich?
I don't know if that's fair, Eric, to really get into that. Like I said, David's a good goalie. You know, Toronto's getting a good goalie. David was good for us, but again, when you look at, so we look at the David situation. We've got Jacob here. David, I think at the end of the year, I had a conversation with David's agent, explored to see if there's a possibility of him coming back, if there's a contract to be done. I think it's fair to say that come the year end, he was going to probably look for a fresh start, which is fair. So you balance that and say, okay, you're going to have a player that more than likely is going to walk at the end of the year. What does the market say? And these trade or these the draft capital doesn't mean a lot right now, but I think it's going to become much more valuable with each day that goes by. And as we get into the summer with a pending expansion draft, I think those picks are going to become much more valuable. So again, good goalie, but happy with the return.
And in Sam's case, pretty safe to say it was important that maybe you don't acquire someone that would have required protection in the Seattle draft.
Well, it's a fair comment. If you look at our roster, I've said this all along, and it's not an excuse for doing or not doing deals, but the reality is we're probably going to be a 7-3-1 team, 7 forwards, 3 defense, 1 goalie. So if you bring something in, so you say, I'm going to go pay an asset or assets to bring something in, and you go, now you're paying a double toll. So you're paying twice the price to go over the bridge once, right? So if you pay the toll to get the player here, then you got to go to Seattle, pay the toll again. Probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So you have to factor. It's not just a function of saying, okay, we're trading a player for a pick. We've got, we were going to probably lose, and at the end of the day, you're going to lose a player. Let's not, you can't get around it, but we felt that this made sense on a couple of different levels other than just the return we got on the player.
Thanks, Brad.
Ryan Leslie, please go ahead.
Brad, you mentioned how difficult it is to move people out that you have history with, but I guess just considering Sam was your first pick, not to get sentimental, but the idea of a high draft pick moving on had to be, as you mentioned, difficult. Just the relationship and as it now concludes.
Yeah, no, Sam and I had a good chat up in my office, and we came here at the same time. I got hired, and Sam was, I think the draft was a month later, and Sam was our first pick. And so we go back ever since I got here. We arrived at the same time. It hasn't gone, there's been lots of ups, lots of downs. It hasn't gone, perfect. But at the end of the day, I try to separate that. He's a good kid. He's a real good kid. And, but you also have to make business decisions. We made one here, and we had a good chat, and always told him if there's ever anything I can do for him moving forward. But you like to have that relationship with your players, but at the end of the day, you also, you have to make business calls. That's the job when you're sitting in the seat, and that's what we did today.
2 remaining questions. Haley Salvian, go ahead, please.
Brad, do these moves signal any type of, future looking transition for this group? Or was this just a matter of, as you said, getting assets for players who may have been walking for nothing in the offseason?
Yeah, good question, Haley. I mean, this isn't, like I said, I'm not about to do autopsies on the corpse here. We've got lots of hockey left to go. Today's a day on the calendar where there's a deadline for transactions up until the season's done. So, we did things that we felt were prudent here today. We felt, that if we were going to make these moves, those moves weren't going to be available to us beyond today.
Already been to Winnipeg.
So we did do that. It doesn't signal, anything other than, we had some.